When my mother told me, "Don't wear your uniform, you'll make everyone uncomfortable." I didn't argue, I just stared at her, wondering how a lifetime of service could still make me an embarrassment. She never knew what I'd done. She never asked. And that night at my brother's wedding, when 300 people laughed at my little Air Force rank, I finally understood the people closest to you can be the cruelest ones to underestimate you. My name is Brielle Maddox, and that was the night silence became my loudest weapon. The late October sun slipped through the blinds, carving pale lines across my small wooden table. The tea beside me had gone cold, its surface still as glass. Beside it sat a stack of training manuals I hadn't touched in weeks, and a small wooden box I couldn't bring myself to open. Inside lay the fragments of a life I never talked about. Ribbons, medals, names of places no one in my family cared to remember. When the doorbell rang, I thought it was a neighbor. Instead, a mail carrier stood there with an ivory envelope, the kind people use for celebrations. My stomach sank before I even read the handwriting on the front. My mother's cursive always carried a strange elegance, sharp at the edges, cold between the lines. Colin and Meredith's wedding magnolia plantation. October 14th. I stared at the card until something small slipped out from between the folds, a note written hastily, slightly smudged, but clear enough to cut through me. "Don't wear your uniform. You'll make everyone uncomfortable." I set it on the table. The words hung in the room like frost. 20 years of service, and I was still the daughter who embarrassed her family. I looked up at the wall above my desk, photographs lined in silent proof. Me in desert flight gear standing beside a squadron in Kandahar. Me outside the NATO base in Germany. Me shaking hands with a general, half our faces hidden by snow. None of them ever asked about those pictures. They preferred to talk about Colin, their golden son, Captain Maddox, the pride of the family. After Dad died, Mom carried every ounce of her expectation to him. I took the other road, the one she never understood. And every step of it, she made sure I knew I'd taken the wrong one. I rose and walked to the closet. The uniform hung there, pressed and perfect, the brass buttons still bright, the nameplate still clear, B. Maddox. I brushed my hand across the shoulder. The scent of sand and wind lingered faintly in the fabric, like a memory that refused to fade. Maybe they'd never know who I really was. I closed the door, but my decision had already taken shape. I would go to the wedding, not to prove anything, not to win anyone back, but to face the silence I'd carried for 2 decades. On the table, the wedding card and the medal caught the last light of sunset, 2 worlds that had never met. I slipped them both into my bag, glanced through the window where the old oaks leaned toward the road, their branches heavy with moss. That wedding wouldn't just be a family gathering. It would be the reckoning I never knew I'd been waiting for. Magnolia Plantation looked like a postcard from another life, oaks, heavy with moss lanterns swaying in the breeze, guests glittering under gold light. I parked, took a breath, and stepped into a world that never seemed to have space for me. Inside, the hostess glanced at the seating chart, hesitated, then smiled too quickly. "You're at table 12 near the back." Of course I was. The table sat close to the catering station, where waiters brushed past carrying trays of champagne. At the front, my mother glowed under chandeliers beside Colin and his bride Meredith, who looked every inch the perfect Southern wife. Her father raised a glass. "The Maddox family has raised a true gentleman and officer. We're honored to welcome him." Applause rolled through the room. "Not one word about me." A woman nearby whispered, "That's his sister. Retired Air Force or something, probably admin work." Laughter followed, polite but sharp. I stared out the window at the water shimmering under the lights and said nothing. A small boy ran by and spilled water onto my dress. He froze, eyes wide. I smiled and said softly, "It's okay. Accidents happen when you move too fast." He ran off, and I realized how true those words were. My family had been moving too fast for years, chasing approval while leaving me behind. When applause erupted again for Colin, I tapped my finger lightly on the tablecloth. My mother caught my eye, her expression warning me to stay quiet. I smiled back. I didn't need to speak. The truth would speak for itself soon enough. I slipped outside to breathe. The night smelled of jasmine and champagne. Laughter spilled from the ballroom, bright and distant. Through the open doors, I heard my mother's voice low-cutting. Colin is the only one who truly makes me proud. She's never understood real sacrifice. The glass trembled in my hand. Real sacrifice I'd sent men into battle and written letters to their families. I'd lost friends and carried their names. And still, to her, I was the disappointment. I didn't walk in. I'd learned long ago that silence could reveal more than shouting ever could. A man stepped out to smoke, squinting at me through the dark. "You're Maddox, right, Ramstein Air Base?" I nodded. He smiled. "Heard about a commander who never raised her voice but always got results. That was you, wasn't it?" I met his eyes, a small, knowing smile forming. "I suppose it was." He nodded respectfully and went back inside. The river glimmered under the moon, calm and endless. I stared at it, feeling the weight of every unspoken word between me and the people inside. If they ever knew the truth about who I really was, would they still laugh? Maybe. But soon they wouldn't need me to say a single thing. The night had already chosen its moment. A soft wind brushed through the oak trees, whispering like a promise. And I knew this celebration was far from over. The ballroom shimmered under gold light, the chandeliers scattering it across polished marble floors and champagne glasses. Laughter floated between the notes of a jazz trio. I sat near the wall, watching the head table glow beneath rows of candles. My mother sat proudly at the center, her smile trained and perfect beside Colin and his bride, every inch the Southern fairy tale. His uniform gleamed the captain's insignia, catching every reflection in the room. The MC lifted the microphone, his voice warm and performative. "Tonight, we celebrate a true hero, Captain Colin Maddox, a man who honors both his family and his country." Applause thundered. My mother's eyes sparkled. No one turned toward me. As glasses clinked and chatter rose again, a man at my table leaned back in his chair, wine-drunk confidence dripping from every word. "So you were Air Force, right? Must have been nice, a cushy desk job, air conditioning, no mud." The laughter that followed was smooth and sharp at once. I set my glass down carefully. "Not quite. I trained combat pilots during 2 tours in Kandahar." He blinked, unimpressed. "Oh, really? They let women do that now." More laughter. My mother turned away. Colin lowered his eyes, pretending not to hear. I smiled slightly, a reflex polished by years of discipline. "Ranks don't matter at weddings," I said. He smirked. "Exactly. Tonight we're all equal." I met his gaze, voice calm, steady. "Not until they do." For a beat, no one understood. The man chuckled awkwardly, filling the silence with noise he didn't know he'd soon regret. A drop of red wine slipped from my glass onto the white linen, spreading like a small wound. Across the room, a waiter glanced over, expression soft, almost sympathetic. The music shifted to something slower, quieter, as if the room itself sensed a storm gathering. I rose from my chair, the laughter already fading behind me, and stepped out onto the veranda. Cool air swept through my hair. My heartbeat slowed into the rhythm of a soldier who's learned to wait. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I'd seen too much to waste energy on that. What I felt was something colder, steadier, the stillness before impact. The truth I knew always finds its own way into the room. The party had found its rhythm again. Music loud, laughter louder, when the sound of engines rolled through the night. Deep, heavy, unmistakable. Headlights cut through the trees outside the plantation gates, sweeping across the lawn before stopping at the entrance. A murmur spread through the crowd. The MC leaned down as a staff member whispered urgently into his ear. "Sir? There's a general outside. Says he was invited." The music faltered. Glasses froze mid-air. I placed my drink down slowly, my pulse calm but aware. I already knew. The doors opened. A tall man in dress uniform stepped inside, metals glinting beneath the chandelier. The room rose to its feet instinctively. "General Arthur Keene," the MC announced. Colin hurried forward, smile wide. "General Keene, I'm honored you could come." Keene shook his hand politely. "Wouldn't miss it, Captain. I served with your unit's training program once." His gaze swept the room, scanning faces until it landed on mine, back corner, forgotten table. His expression shifted, steady and certain. Then, in a voice that carried through every corner of the hall, And where's Commander Maddox? A ripple of confusion moved through the guests. Colin's smile faltered. You mean? Keen's tone sharpened. Commander Brielle Maddox. She's here, isn't she? Chairs creaked. Every head turned. I stood. The scrape of my chair against the floor sliced through the silence. Keen straightened heels together and saluted. Ma'am, permission to approach. The air cracked like thunder. I walked forward slow and deliberate. The gold stars on his shoulders caught the light. The entire room held its breath. My mother's face drained of color. Colin's jaw slackened. Keen extended his hand. It's an honor to serve under your command again, Commander Maddox. Your leadership saved more lives than any medal could honor. A murmur surged through the crowd. Someone near the press table whispered, Maddox, wasn't she the first female commander in NATO Air Division? The noise built like a wave-shock disbelief recognition. Meredith turned to Colin, her voice trembling. You never told me your sister outranked you. Across the hall, a small flag by the window stirred its fabric, catching the draft from the open doors. A glass shattered somewhere near the back, sharp and final. The spotlight hit the nameplate on my dress uniform, B. Maddox. And for the first time that night, it wasn't something to hide. Keen faced the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, you're in the presence of a woman whose leadership changed lives. Please stand with me. 300 people rose. The sound of silence was deafening. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply stood tall, shoulders square, head slightly bowed. It was the only way I knew how to reclaim what was mine without saying a word. The room was silent. The orchestra froze mid-song. General Keen still held his salute, the chandelier's light glinting off my nameplate, B. Maddox like a blade in air. Through the microphone, his voice echoed clear. It's an honor to serve under your command again, Commander Maddox. Your leadership saved more soldiers than medals ever could. I met his eyes. It was teamwork, General. Always was. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A reporter whispered, Wait! Operation Sentinel heads turned. Colin's lips parted. That was you. A woman who'd mocked me set down her glass, trembling. Meredith looked lost. My mother's eyes filled, unable to blink. A waiter near the wall murmured, Ma'am? Colin tried to recover. I didn't know you were Keen, cut him short. That's because she never needed anyone to announce her. No one spoke. The flag above the balcony stirred, as if saluting too. Keen turned to me. Commander, would you say something for the record? I took the mic. My heart beat steady as years of silence found their voice. Respect isn't inherited, I said. It's earned. In silence, no applause, only stillness, my mother covered her mouth, crying quietly, and for once, no one dared look away. Keen saluted once more, and the room followed 300 people standing without command. Colin stepped forward. Why didn't you tell us? I met his eyes. Because you never asked. Keen approached my mother. Ma'am, I served under your daughter. Her strategies saved my unit. I came tonight to honor her. Her voice broke. I told her not to wear the uniform. Keen nodded. You should be proud she didn't need it. Tears slipped down her face. A group of young officers stepped forward. Ma'am, one said softly, You've shown us what humility looks like. They saluted and left quietly. I walked outside. Moonlight touched the river. Music drifted behind me. Moon River faint and trembling. Keen joined me. You handled that better than any debrief I've seen. You taught me well, General. He smiled. I left before the night ended. No victory, no triumph. Just peace. Because at last, every gaze behind me understood. I stepped out into the night, leaving the noise behind. The air was cool, threaded with the hum of crickets. From inside, Moon River floated softly through the open doors, but the song no longer belonged to me. My part of the night was done. General Keen joined me on the steps, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp as ever. You handled that better than any debrief I've ever seen, he said. I smiled faintly. I've had worse briefings. He chuckled, a quiet sound between old soldiers who understood that some victories were fought without weapons. At my car, he noticed the leather bag on the seat, its zipper half open, the corner of my folded uniform visible inside. You didn't wear it, did you? She asked me not to. I said. He nodded once. It didn't matter. The uniform spoke anyway, the words caught in my throat. He was right. Tonight I hadn't needed medals or insignia. The truth had worn its own colors. As I drove past the gates of Magnolia, my headlights brushed against the flag still waving in the wind. I pulled over by the river, rolled the window down, and whispered, "For the first time they saw me." But I didn't need them to. Then I turned the music up and drove into the quiet, finally free. 2 weeks after the wedding, I returned to my small house in Charleston. The air smelled of salt and rain, the kind that settles over the harbor after a storm. On the kitchen table sat 2 envelopes, one from my mother, one from Colin. For a long moment, I simply looked at them, feeling a strange calm, as I traced the familiar name, Maddock, written across each one. I brewed tea, the steam curling softly through the quiet, and opened the first. My mother's handwriting trembled, her words uncertain, but sincere. "You made me understand that silence can hold more grace than pride ever could. I'm sorry I believed a woman's honor was in her obedience. I didn't know what you carried all those years, but I do now. I'm proud of you, even if I came to it late." I folded the letter gently. Tears came, but they weren't heavy. They carried release, not grief. The second envelope was Colin's. His writing was bold, a little uneven. "I was proud that night, not for what you did, but for who you are." The proudest moment of my wedding wasn't saying I do. It was realizing who my sister really was. I smiled, soft and genuine. For the first time, the word sister felt whole, earned, not given. I opened my old service scrapbook and slipped in the photo Colin had enclosed, me and General Keane shaking hands under the chandelier's glow. Beside it, I placed an older photo, my squadron in Afghanistan, dirt-streaked, grinning in the desert sun. 2 worlds that had never touched now shared a page. Family and duty, peace and battle no longer divided. I closed the book, whispering, "They finally saw me, but you always did." I said it for the ones who couldn't come home, the ones who never stopped believing. And for the first time, it was enough. A year later, on a crisp October morning, I drove to Arlington. The city was quiet, washed in pale gold light. Beyond the gates, rows of white and blue flags lined the hill like ripples of memory, stretching toward the horizon. I carried a bouquet of white lilies and the photograph taken at Colin's wedding, a reminder of how far I had come from that night. The wind whispered through the trees as I walked the familiar gravel path. No music, no lights, no voices trying to fill the silence, just footsteps measured and steady. Each one seemed to echo with the names of those who couldn't take another. At the front of the ceremony stood Major General Keane, reading names from a list that trembled slightly in his hand. His voice was deep, reverent. When he paused, the air itself seemed to still. Then he looked toward me and said softly but clearly, "To Commander Maddox, the quiet kind of leader this country still needs." Heads turned. I didn't rise. Instead, I placed my hand over my heart, stood at attention, and bowed my head. It was enough. My silence had always spoken louder than applause. After the ceremony, I walked to the far corner of the cemetery, where the oldest stones caught the morning sun. I knelt before one marked Captain John Rivers. He followed her lead. The flowers brushed against the granite as I whispered, "They finally saw me, John. But you saw me first." The wind lifted just then, rustling the flags like 1,000 hands raised in salute. I stood tall, shoulders square, and returned it a single, slow gesture carved by habit and respect. From afar, it might have looked like any other ceremony, just a woman in a gray coat alone among the flags. But in that silence, something vast settled, a peace that needed no witness, a dignity that needed no words. I turned to leave the lilies swaying in the breeze behind me, and for the first time I didn't look back, because the salute had already been returned, 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 had already been returned,